Actually, it's a little too much, the introduction. I'm just a normal doctor, let's say. And yeah, I've done some things, but probably you will do also one day, and nobody will call you a hero or a pioneer or whatever. The days for pioneers and heroes are over, I think, and we have to do just perfect medicine, and also we should think about it, what it means to the world, and means for the future. And about that subject I will talk about today, not so much about cardiothoracic surgery, because you can read that in every textbook. So I'm just telling you where I'm coming from, which is from Austria, as you've heard. I live in Vienna, and I work in the south part of the country. It looks like that though, yeah, which is okay. So it's sometimes difficult to work, even in winter time. And that's my hospital. So anyway, if we talk about medicine, we certainly have to think about death. Death is everywhere, and we always try to forget about it. Actually, we were fighting death now since probably 100, 150 years successfully. Before that, we were just trying it. And we are now getting successful. But I don't know if you learn about death. I don't know if you learn how to deal with death. But actually, normally, death is not an option. Death is failure, and failure is not an option. Not only in Apollo 13, but also in our society. So why do people then actually die? I think there are very common causes, which you probably all know. And well, with all this knowledge, they still die. So we have to think about what is the progress of medicine which we accomplish. On one hand, and you all learn it in your schools about the health and diseases and the interventions and the progress, if we can treat the diseases, if we can progress in the fight against death. But also we have quite a lot of social pressures, which we were talking about on later, which come upon us as well. So nowadays we also have to distinguish between the necessary and the not necessary if we're going into enhancement. Nowadays we probably don't talk so much about disease management anymore, but more about health enhancement or human enhancement. So if we talk about that, we're more and more going into the direction of the absence of disease and more enhancement of the abilities of human beings. We also have to talk or think about the definition of what actually is well-being. Anyway, since a few years, a few decades, the speed of innovations is speeding up in an incredible amount of time, and at breakneck speed, as Scott Gottlieb put it, and sometimes we have the feeling we cannot manage it anymore. It's getting kind of out of control. And even Aldous Huxley, you probably all know, said over 100 years ago that it's going to be more and more difficult to be well. Just think about it, to be well. So probably everybody of us has a disease in us which we discover or which we already know, and it's more and more difficult to be healthy because of all our diagnostic achievements. If we now take all this knowledge and put it into the new technologies, we probably start to deal with three types of technology. One is genetic engineering, the other one is robotics and artificial intelligence, and the other one is nanotechnology. The first one, as you probably all know, it hasn't been any subject when I was studying, because when I was studying I heard the first time about human immune deficiency syndrome, later was known as AIDS. We heard there were 1 or 2 cases and you can fight it. Nowadays you can fight it. Nowadays you have CRISPR and Cas9 technologies. And the problem is here now that we do things and we don't know how to reverse them. So we're cutting out part of the genes, and then we probably implant little bombs into the genetic code. So on the one hand, we kind of approach the end of human life. On the other hand, we hope to end human suffering. We probably all ask us if this genetic engineering is happening among mad people, mad scientists. Well, nowadays they are allowed to get into embryos, and they do anyway if they can. Problem is how to control it. We're probably now more and more into the engineering of a new human race, probably trying to influence evolution, which we do since a few years. Here you see a little app or a little computer program where you can program babies and then play with them. That's no fun anymore. That's happening. So, I mean, games are over. We are kind of erasing genetic codes. We're deleting, and then probably we're adding out humanity. We don't know it yet, but it can be. So if we're aiming for designer babies, it can be also that this is a moral obligation. We have to do it if we can do it, if we have the possibility to grow better children. In 50 years, all of you are here looking the same, thinking the same, behaving the same, probably a better world, because nobody can be envious of the other one. No? We'll see. This was put up into the discussion by Julian Savulescu. I don't know if you know him. He's of Romanian origin, one of the most important bioethicists in the world now, working at the moment in Oxford. So we are certainly going into the direction of designer babies and into a direction of so-called rational design. Savulescu says we on one hand can have lottery, as we have had since millions of years up to today. You are all part of the lottery, I'm part of the lottery. On the other hand, we can have rational design and make designer babies which are disease-free, perhaps. So it's a kind of tricking out whatever created us. Creation for accident, by God, whatever you believe in. But this way of creating is also making mistakes, because perhaps we can eradicate these mistakes, and then genetic editing is like taking out an appendix or making laser surgery or whatever. So we have to think about the classification of this editing. And whatever you call it, it's in the moment it's a little plain, but perhaps it's gonna be the future. If you go back a few hundred years, we already knew since then, or we already know since then, since Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan, that man itself perhaps only cares about himself and what makes him better at any cost. So man seeks to get for himself whatever it's possible. And I don't know if you wrote Leviathan or similar books, but it's certainly worth it. But anyway, if we put ethics, which are growing more and more important since those ages before Enlightenment and now since Enlightenment, these ethics can just be simple. If we say life is better than death, or disease is worse than health, and so on. And if it's simple like that, we just keep on editing and changing the genetic code. On the other hand, if we don't do it, the probability that you will help somebody is zero. So we are already helping people with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or some spinal diseases or whatever, and can help them that their diseases disappear. If we stop genetic engineering, the chance to help these people is zero. So on the other hand, the benefits certainly, it depends on the perspective you look at it, are very different. If you look at it from the perspective of health and disease, death and disease, the benefits are very big. If you look at the perspective of human enhancement, benefits certainly are very small. So if we might eradicate disease in the future, then it's probably worth it getting more and more into genetic engineering, like also Steven Pinker, a colleague of the other one I just mentioned, said. We certainly talk about restrictions also of this research, and on the other hand of stopping this type of research. If we do that, as I said, a vast majority of people would benefit. And if we delay, even if we delay this type of research, 100,000 of people probably wouldn't benefit of the results of this research. On the other hand, there are lots of bioethicists talking about values. Nowadays, we talk about values a lot anyway. I don't know if you know what your values are. It's certainly our societies don't know what our values are, but we always try to defend them, no matter what they are. In this race for genetic engineering, they always put up values like dignity, like also sacredness, like playing God, as I mentioned, like privacy and equity. And equity, as we hear later on, is an extremely important value in this race. So if we have all these benefits, which I showed to you, and on the other hand, we have these values and the outcry by bioethicists, then we just tell them, get out of the way. You have no worth in this race. So, where does all this stop? Where does IT stop? Where does genetic engineering stop? Where do we stop as human race? So in a few years, we're going to be able to connect our nerve cells in our brains to the cloud and transfer information from the cloud into our brains. And we probably are done even more godlike. So with all these little machines which connect to our synapses and our nerve, then we can influence people, we can transfer memories from dead people into living people, and so on. So it's also possible then to have the whole armies of people then, soldiers, to be influenced by one human being who wants to involve them into wars, and they're gonna be marching on. Also with smart dust, you can connect people's brain with networks and connect them among each other. And then by connecting these people to brain-computer interfaces, you can influence them and change them. These connectors are already that small, can be implanted, and will be smaller even. So we are working on the evolution of brain-computer interfaces, and if we look at this depiction, we are already pretty far. We have created, or we know about worms, we know about snails and their connectomes. We know about mouse brains a lot and their connectomes. We're working on the human connectome now, which will take us a few years probably. And then we decode this connectome as well and connect it to computers then. And that's the race in the direction of singularity. And when we have reached singularity, then the whole race will take off at a speed which we cannot influence anymore. So in the moment we are like 2018, in the next 20 years, we probably, or 30 years, we will reach singularity, and then we don't know anymore how to influence the whole race, probably. So the question is, if we have to redefine the human, if we have to, if we want to. The train of this development has already left the station. If we want to get on the train, it's almost too late. If we want to regulate the train speed, it's also almost too late. So we have to get on the train and know what's going on. You all have to learn it, what's going on, what the possibilities are. And with all these GNR technologies, it's possible to influence our future, that we are making possible the fusion of machines and humans, and more or less make a new species, the transhumans. So if we reach transhumanism and singularity, probably we have a new stage of evolution which we have never dreamed of, and people say already it's going to be reached by 2050 or 2045. The problem is only we can, all these advancements are probably very helpful. We are afraid of the machines, certainly. On the other hand, we are afraid of artificial intelligence, we are afraid of nanotechnology and of genetic engineering. But these are not bad things so far, unless artificial intelligence just takes off. But so far, these are not bad things. Bad things are they only if we make them bad things, and if people without values make them to bad things, and this has happened throughout technology. If we look at last century and all these things which happened in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and in the aftermath with communism, then people used the machines not for the good of the humans anyway. So if we think about what we can do with our brains, it's gonna be kind of horrifying. And probably we should take a break and think about what's ahead of us and what that means for us, for each single one of you, and if each single one of you wants that, or on the other hand can influence it. So probably the human being is kind of taken off and we can stop him or her. And we know basically all of us is just a kind of animal with two legs standing on these two legs, and that's about it. If we don't have civilization which shapes us. This was already realized by William Shakespeare, and it's still true, I think. But where's the control of this race, of the race of humans to transhumanism? Because if we think it further, this is actually the end of our world like we know it, because it's the end of each of you as an individual, it's the end of work, and therefore probably the end of humanity. Because in the future, if we look at the possibilities of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, this is the end of myself. The end of the good old human, the overtaking of artificial intelligence, and the end of this human as we know it. Some people say, regarding to the law of accelerating returns, it takes probably the takeover of artificial intelligence will take probably 200 years, but probably it's already happening in this century. So it's extremely difficult to predict. And if you look at the advancements of these laws of accelerating returns, the advancement come at a very high speed, and we cannot really control it anymore until we have the so-called self-replication. So we're in the middle of the fourth revolution. What we do with it, because it's challenging about what we up to now have meant what is human, with all the possibilities that we have now, with all the machines and the rise of the machines and the problems which come up with the machines. Bertrand Russell, a philosopher which I very much like most of the time, unless he talks about mathematics, because then I don't understand him anymore, said people are also very dangerous if they take off because they bring us slavery. So if we are getting under controls of the machines, then we're heading towards slavery. On the one hand, it's a very high potential, which is probably beneficial for us, but there's also a lot of peril which lays into this development, and most of it originates out of medicine. So in the middle of the fourth revolution, the cyber problems approaching us are very complex and very frightening. So the world of the future we cannot really imagine. The only thing which we know for sure from this Gallup publication, that a lot of jobs are going to be lost. If you look at the jobs in healthcare, it's only about 20%. But if you look into jobs of manufacturing and so on, it's from 60 to 80%. So this is going to happen until the year of 25 or 30. So on the other hand, the good things about this fourth revolution with all these machines and developments is that it's possible to connect millions of people very easily, to change the efficiency and the type of interconnection between people. Problem is certainly because we are still not able to keep up with this development, that the organizations cannot keep up. As a human being, we cannot keep up anyway. And one problem, which I will show you now in the next minutes, is that inequality in the world will grow because of this development. So as there was a lot of talking about it at the last forum in Davos this year, there are perils and there are promises of this fourth revolution. And in the moment still, the choice is ours, but probably we don't have any choice anymore in a few years. I don't know if you know the King Midas story. Yes. Probably, yes. So King Midas wished that everything was turning gold, what he touched, and it turned gold. Also his food and also his family. So the same can happen to us with artificial intelligence. We don't know what happens if we open this box of Pandora of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, which is now worked on in our labs. So one question is now, should we stop certain types of experiments, certain types of research? And I've put up some of these topics here. It's possible that we stop some of them, but we also know that in some of the countries which we cannot influence, this type of research is ongoing, is in the moment ongoing, and it will never be stoppable. So if we have these types of terrors, these types of weapons now, we must not forget about Chekhov's law. I don't know if you know Chekhov's law. It just tells you if you have a weapon hanging on the wall, it's going to be fired one day, because if it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there. So people work on biological weapons, people work on cyber weapons, and we know it. We feel it almost every day. We have it in the news, especially cyber weapons, every day. And people are gambling with the devil, and we don't know what the hell looks like, where the devil is coming from. That's the problem. So I don't think North Korea actually is the problem anymore. Cyber criminality and biological criminality is the problems, and I think as long as we can influence, we should be very, very careful with these developments. These developments, like as I told you, also in drones and CRISPR and so on, 3D printing are already used and worked on by terrorists, and we certainly don't know what's coming out of this. And the problem is that people who want to destroy the world don't have to be very intelligent anymore. You just have to look at Donald Trump. The problem also is that there are no legal restrictions also to drain our brains of the information in the future. Now you drain the information out of Facebook and out of all these social media, but in the future with all this connectivity you can also drain the information out of living brains. And still we don't have any voice in the public which speaks against it, no public outcry. We don't worry obviously about it. And the problem is, which I already mentioned, that we are heading into a future which we will probably benefit from it, but the global south will not benefit, and there will be a future which, I don't know if you know the movie Time of the Machine of H.G. Wells, which is depicted there, will be even more terrible, I think, if we don't stop the disruption of the society. Because if we keep on with these disruptive technologies, and these disruptive technologies are very expensive, only a few people can afford it. For instance, in my hospital, I have on a daily basis decide which patients get the new drugs, which cost probably $500,000 a year or so, or they're getting more and more expensive, and we have only certain budgets, and if all these treatments are getting more and more expensive, society cannot afford it anymore. So we have to stop treatments on some patients. If we talk about this with regimes or problems in the south, in the poorer countries, they're even more worse certainly. So the problem nowadays in the industrialization of medicine is that medicine shouldn't be a luxury, and it is in our countries somehow, and it is in the south in any case. So we have to think about what's the place of the human being in a future life. Where is the place of the ordinary human? Probably are only poor people ordinary humans, and all the rest of us who can afford it is kind of enhanced transhuman. We live in times of maximization of self-interest. everybody of you, also especially in the globalized markets, is interested only in maximizing the self-interest. We know it already since the Enlightenment thinkers, and we know it today. We have had these problems originating out of that in the times of the Industrial Revolution, followed by the capitalism. We only had very few people with lots of power and lots of money, and the rest of the people suffered and had not very much money. We have inequality all over the world. We have it from Russia to Mexico. We have a very poor development regarding democracy in the world. We have not even 50% in the world people living in freedom, or countries living in freedom. And we have a very big divide between countries who are, for instance, Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries. Non-Muslim countries in not developed countries having a very poor economic progress if you compare it to our progress in the Western world. So we have certainly, as I already mentioned it, a global identity crisis if you talk about values and so on. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said if you want to destroy people, if you want to destroy a society, then you take away the roots. And roots, I think, are values. And another man, which was not so respected, was an American terrorist. The problem in Muslim world is that rock stars and singers have more to say and are more valuable to the society than Muhammad, whatever Muhammad means to us, but I think you know what I mean. And this wealth gap I was talking about is broadening more and more. The middle class can somehow perhaps get into the top class, and it has some chance, but the lower class, which is certainly more than 50%, has no chances. So we have for the future not the problem of China, which is a emerging economy, it's automation certainly. And the robots which are coming up are killing, so to say, jobs. And on the other hand, today, probably you heard on CNN him talking about the problems with Iran. Nukin said these problems are not on our screens, they are probably 50 to 100 years away. So you know actually what people are leading America. So technology on the one hand is killing jobs, on the other hand it will create jobs, and that's the big chance. On the other hand, what is the big problem is that the fourth revolution will kill jobs in the global south. And the impact there is not yet to be imagined. So if we have this new type of employees now coming up to our factories, to our cafes, to our barbershops or whatever, there will be a redistribution from factories from the south where they have cheap labor now to the cheaper robots which we can afford in the north again. So the gap and the lights will go out in the south. Here you see a map of the world from the satellite where you see all the lights in the north and almost no lights in the south, and this will even be worse. So the question we all have to ask us, what's going to happen with us in the future? Robots are partly taking over, artificial intelligence is getting over, decision-making programs are taking over. Our labor is not more needed. What are we going to do with all this time? We have to live probably in virtual worlds. Lots of games are already developed. These games are probably more and more important with all these virtual realities which are developed, and we probably are going to live, except 4 hours, we probably work a day in these virtual worlds, and probably we all will receive basic income, at least most of us, and then the rest of the day is going to be played. So these unattractive countries, as I said, will get poorer and poorer, and the rest of the South will probably either be slaves or will be killed probably. So all these values which we have are values of enlightenment. But we already know since these 200 years where we had enlightenment, that on the other hand also these values bring us big problems because they bring developments like capitalism and so on. So